The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
You know, among the many things that the cell phone has done away with, one of the mainstays of training camp. Knock, knock. Coach wants to see you. Bring your playbook. That person was known as the Turk, the one who had to deliver the bad news that you were going to be cut. Doesn't come that way anymore. You just get a text, show up in the coach's office, and when you get that, it is not good news. Tuesday, 4 o'clock is the cut-down time when rosters have to be down to 53. They got the final dress rehearsal tomorrow for those on the bubble. Noon kickoff between the Ravens and the Commanders at Northwest Stadium, and then we're off and rolling in the regular season. Thank God. I mean, these exhibition games, even the ones where, quote-unquote, the starters play. I mean, what do we see? 4 plays from Jaden Daniels on Monday night against Cincinnati, and around the league, many starting quarterbacks didn't even take the field, including Aaron Rodgers, who is yet to take a snap for the Pittsburgh Steelers anyway, at least during a game. I don't think it matters that much. Guy's 41 years old. He's been around a long time. But, no, he didn't even play in the game last night. So Steelers will start the season with their quarterback not taking any snaps. And that narrative of, you know, we can't get our timing down because we didn't participate in enough real plays during the exhibition season. Well, that's sort of gone by the wayside, although we did see Joe Burrow play a significant amount of time on Monday night and even took a sack, which I'm sure had everybody in Bengals Nation freaking out. But back to my point about the cell phone, it has really changed things, right? I mean, every player has a cell phone, of course, and the team has their number, and they don't just text them about things like, you know, showing up and bringing your playbook and you're out, but other things involving the team. And Charlie Casserly, who later became the general manager of the Redskins and was the GM the last time they won the Super Bowl, he's now retired, worked for the NFL Network for quite some time after he lost his job as the GM of the Houston Texans. And when he was the assistant GM under Bobby Beathard, that was his job. And training camp was a lot different then than it is now. Like, for example, yesterday was the end of training camp. Okay, great, that's it. It was really more or less like a regular week in Ashburn. Back in the day when they used to go to Carlisle, to Dickinson College, and the big 6'5" players would sleep in dorm beds made for, 18-year-old girls who were like 5'4", that was a big relief when it was over. Like, generally what would happen to fire up the team is they would have a scheduled last day of practice, and the team would gather around the coach, and the coach would say, okay, practice is over. We can all go home. And then they'd go nuts and they'd spray each other with shaving cream and they'd hop in their cars and drive back home. That doesn't work that way anymore. Training camps, for most teams, now some teams still go away, but for most teams, like how the Commanders did it, they were in Ashburn. They were in a hotel for the first couple of weeks, and then players were allowed to go home. I guess the players who are unsure of making the team got to stay in the hotel or some type of temporary housing, and they just, went through kind of what you go through during a regular week of practice. It's so much different. So everything has changed in a great way, and it is so much different now than it used to be. Some of those traditions have been lost, including the Turk. And, Charlie used to have some great stories of players hiding under their beds. They would have a player who would go to the cafeteria and refuse to leave, like he's eating his breakfast and he gets a tap on the shoulder. Coach would like to see you. And he says, no, I'm not leaving. I'm going to eat here forever. Those kind of things. And that's all gone. And, the good thing for players who do get cut is they put enough on tape that another team might be interested, or for some, it's the end of the road. And now there are other places to play. You've still got the UFL. Guys can hang around for that if they want and don't make much money, but might get another opportunity. So all those things, add up now and make it a lot different. Everything's a lot different. than it used to be. Anyway, this was Dan Quinn yesterday on how he approaches the upcoming cut down when they have to get down to 53 by Tuesday afternoon, and what he has told the team about it.
This time of year is always funky for players, and the message I had told them yesterday, I mean, I know this is a difficult week, and I encourage them, don't think about next week this week. It's not going to help you perform better this week. And so looking at a roster, am I going to be on the 53 or the practice squad, or what do my odds look like? And so that was really the message I tried to give yesterday, because it's this funky space. There's some guys that are already on the roster, some that are fighting for it. So I just tried to make that, hey, this is normal. You know, like everybody has these same emotions, but can we bring it back to be grounded and present into what we're now? So I haven't gone too far ahead with Bill or many of the other players just yet.
I think with the schedule, we'll talk to you after Saturday's game. What will you guys, you certainly have an idea of who you want to keep.
Right.
What will your coaching staff go through after that game with the guys having a couple days off and then the cut down?
Yeah, Adam and the staff had a big personnel meeting with us this week where we reviewed, you know, games and where people are at. And so each of the coaches, you know, goes through each position and through each player. And it's helpful, you know, because you're not in every meeting room. You're not, you know, in every spot. So we did have that this week. And then this week we'll have some more evaluations. And then Adam, you know, will huddle everybody up as well. And then think of the two spaces of the 53 and the 70. And as everybody would know, the roster is also, it's a little fluid as it even starts, you know, the earliest part of the season. I can remember, you know, the first being in the NFL, hearing Bill Walsh say that. And at the time, I didn't really know what he meant, you know, as I was in my rookie coaching season. But now, you know, 25 years later, I get it. And it's still pretty true today, you know, of how that works.
Yeah, with the practice squad and with other teams making cuts. Like, for example, at 4 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, we'll have the 53 for the Commanders, but Adam Peters will be combing through the cuts from the other teams to find players who may be better than the ones they have on the roster. So the fluid part of it is all part of it. And that's also a reason why they do the cut down as early as they do. It's going to be more than a week and a half before they start the season. So that gives them plenty of time to make those, as he calls, fluid moves. He mentioned Bill, and this is part of the reason that Brian Robinson is all but gone from this roster. He's not even practicing with the team. He's not even in Ashburn, and either he's going to be traded sometime this weekend or before 4 o'clock on Tuesday, or he's going to be released. $3.4 million. They're not going to pay that, and part of it is because of this 7th-round pick from Arizona, Bill Ja'Cory Croxy Merritt, who just goes by Bill, which makes it a lot easier for everybody. He is not necessarily the replacement for Brian Robinson, but he is one of the key people from the running back room and probably will wind up returning kicks as well. And as far as the replacement for Brian Robinson, well, if you were watching the Monday night game against Cincinnati, you saw him. I mean, Chris Rodriguez, who's been off and on this roster for quite a while, practice squad back and forth, looks like he is going to take over as that power back, the short yardage guy, the guy around the goal line, and Quinn confirmed that yesterday.
Yes, and I would say there's also parts of our offense that are a little bit untraditional, you know, where we're not, you know, traditional and using a lead blocker sometimes in short yardage. So, but I do like knowing that Chris has that tackle breaking ability, and especially, you know, in a small space. But yeah, I would say that would be one that's at the front of the thinking first.
Yeah, it's different with running backs. Like with quarterbacks, you either prove it or you don't, you're gone. And running backs can kind of work their way into a position like he has, and good for him for sticking through it. I mean, he's been back and forth, and looks like Chris Rodriguez a good fit. One of the when they get down to cutting Brian Robinson, Rodriguez will be one of just a few guys left from the Rivera era. Can you imagine that? And that's only 2 years ago. You know, only 2 years ago from that roster, 10 left, 10 players left, and. You know, we'll get to the Terry McLaurin thing in just a second. That's, you know, not 100% either that he's going to be on the opening game roster. But right now, Quinn has some other things that he's thinking about, and it's, he admits, keeping him up at night.
The things that are going good don't keep you up at night. it's the things that you're struggling with and stressed about to go. So this time of year, it's the roster and giving insight to Adam and to his team to make sure we're nailing it, the right playing time at a practice or a game for the evaluations to get there. Fortunately, we've hit a lot of the things that stressed me out. Is the team ready for these end-of-game moments? And so last year we were new together, and so it was also new for me communicating with Cliff and Joe and Larry in game. We're going to go for here on fourth if it gets to 1, 2, or 3. So for me, having another lap at that all through camp, that's been good. So my biggest stressor is just providing the right information, getting the right looks, and it'll be a tough team for the 53. Tough decisions for sure, but as a coach, that's also what you want. To say, man, these are some really tough decisions. And so I'm definitely looking at those, and that's what's keeping me up.
I cannot believe that all the stress is related to the roster. I got to believe there's some Terry McLaurin stress there. And we're now at August 22nd. July 22nd, the veterans were due to report to camp. He didn't report to camp that day. He sat out for 4 days, cost him supposedly $200,000 in fines, and I don't even think they can remove that. And a month later, he still doesn't have a deal. And on top of that, he didn't participate in minicamp, and he is yet to practice. Now, he was cleared to practice by coming off the physically unable to perform list earlier this week. He was excused from practice on Wednesday, and yesterday just showed up about 20 minutes into practice and watched from the sidelines. I never thought it would get to this point. And what's happening in Dallas between Micah Parsons and Jerry Jones, it is all-out war now. You're not getting that here because nobody's saying anything, and rightly so. And Josh Harris may be involved in the negotiations and talking to Adam Peters, but he's certainly not talking to the media about it. Jerry's talking to anybody who wants to listen to what's happening, including that he claims the agent for Micah Parsons told him to stick it up his A, but now the agent has denied that too. So it's just a mess. We have a different kind of a situation here, but who'd have thought it would get to this with this guy? But here we are. And it appears to be an overreach by the agent that they ask for numbers which just aren't realistic. And nobody around the league says, pay Terry what he wants. Most around the league are saying it's a number in the 20s, not in the 30s per year. Somewhere 27, 28 million, not 32, 33 million. And yes, that makes a difference. Teams make a lot of money. Salary cap is big. They have cap room, but they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. So here's the view of the situation from two NFL insiders. First, Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network, who talked to Rich Eisen yesterday about the situation with McLaurin.
He's still going through the ramp-up process. A lot of that's happening behind closed doors. The ankle, from what I'm told, is healed. He did have a real ankle injury. That was not a made-up thing. He had a real ankle injury back in January. He rehabbed it in the offseason. He's fine on that standpoint. But, again, you have to do conditioning. You have to work your way back in to being ready to play. The fact that McLaurin has begun that ramp-up process would indicate he believes somewhere he's going to be playing in week 1. He also has requested a trade. That's been sitting there for a couple of weeks. There have been teams that have called the Commanders, but the sense that people get when they've talked to Washington is we don't really want to do this, so the price is going to be really, really high. They're playing as if Terry McLaurin is going to be back on the field. Could they make one more run at this and make another offer? The sides have not been anywhere in the vicinity of each other. You look at where the wide receiver market has gone. There's a fair argument if you're Terry McLaurin, hey, even at my age, I'm in the same draft class as DK Metcalf. Why am I not getting $32, $33, $34 million per year? From the Commanders' standpoint, they're looking at a close to 30-year-old receiver. There's not a great long history of guys continuing to produce 1,000-yard seasons. But much like Trey Hendrickson, Terry McLaurin can go, I got 1,000 yards every year. I'm always going to have 80 catches and 1,000 yards and career-high touchdowns last year. Like, what indication do you get that I'm going to fall off? We'll see where that one goes. These next few days are going to be really important for Washington and Terry McLaurin to see if they've got a path forward here that gets him ready to play right out of the gate and isn't something that drags into the season and all of a sudden brings up all those other levers we've been talking about with all these hold-ins.
Well, and the question is, when he's turning 30 years old, because McLaurin just a week or two away from his 30th birthday, is he going to be willing to give up game checks at $22.5 million? just to fight for a number that he's probably not going to get to. And the Commanders hold the cards here because he's got a contract. He wants to play this year, he plays under that contract. If he sits out the whole year, then that contract rolls over into next year. And then if he plays well next year, they can franchise him the year after that he's 33 years old. Or if he plays this year and doesn't sign an extension, they would have the option to either franchise him or let him walk, which could happen because Terry McLaurin was found in the 3rd round. You can find other receivers later in the draft. Maybe not, hit the lottery like you did with Terry, but seems like you get more and more good receivers, great receivers coming out of college, and the numbers show you that when you reach the age of 30, you decline. And to his credit, he hasn't missed a game in 5 years. He's been a great teammate, a great person in the community, the whole thing, but business is business. This is Albert Breer of SI.com. He was on with Dan Patrick. Here's how he's looking at the Terry deal.
That's one of those where I think we get to the doorstep of the season and everybody puts their cards on the table. And I just think, and this is just me talking, I think Terry is too important to what Dan Quinn has built there over the last 18 months. And winning with the Commanders and being a one-team guy is too important to Terry for them not to find some middle ground. But it does feel like at this point they need a deadline to push them there. And I think there's going to have to be a point, too, for the Commanders where they're going to have to look at it and say, you know what, our data might tell us this, that like it's tough to sign a receiver of that age to this sort of guarantee. I think they're going to have to bend a little bit and say, like, this is a special case because of what he means to our franchise.
Okay, and apparently, according to the reporting, I mean, nobody's said anything publicly from either the McLaurin side and I'm kind of surprised that his agent hasn't talked. But we haven't heard anything from the agent, and we haven't heard anything from Adam Peters on this. And Dan Quinn has made it pretty clear he's not going to go there. He says, I'm not going to play Where's Waldo. Is he going to be at practice or not? Which he has not been. This thing looks like it's headed in the Commanders' favor, but it seems that Terry is dug in with an agent who may be inexperienced. You got to think of it this way: Terry McLaurin was a 3rd-round pick. The top agents weren't running to represent him when he came out of Ohio State. They were looking for the bigger money fish. And he apparently has stuck with that agent. Good for him for loyalty. But the agent may be swimming in waters that are too deep for him, who doesn't clearly understand the full picture of this, hasn't negotiated deals anywhere near this size. And that may be working to Terry's detriment. And the other thing that I was thinking about with McLaurin is the possibility of the real scorched earth that this will leave behind, even if he comes up with an extension that will have everybody smiling before the start of the season. Because the reputation, which he has earned, his play on the field, his command of the media, the things that he does charity-wise, community, everything to me was pointing to a post-NFL career where he would have his choice of what he would want to do. Would he want to stay with the Commanders and work in the front office? I think that could be a possibility. I've even thought he could run for mayor. He's got that kind of charm to him and respect. And he might be somebody who could go on to things like that. He's also said that he's talked to Magic Johnson about becoming the type of entrepreneur that Magic has become. And he could do it here in this city. He could be one of those, and they don't happen very often anymore. Even Tom Brady finished his career elsewhere. One-team guys, they don't happen much. And there was a time in this city where players found that to be important. Joe Jacoby, at the end of his career, could have become a free agent, could have gotten more money elsewhere. Now, he was coming to the end, and he'd had some injuries. And as it turned out, really the first year of free agency, he only played 5 games because of his back and had to retire. But he looked at the landscape and he said, there's going to be opportunities for me in the Washington, D.C. area because of my name. He was one of the famed hogs, and he had a car dealership here for a while. He was doing some broadcasting with me and others, and had some other business interests along the way. And players used to look at that as an advantage. And Terry, I think, still could. But if this is going to be a pure money respect thing, then, it might be that they finally have to come to a point and they say, well, we can't give it to you. You want to be traded. He's already asked for a trade. I don't think there's much interest in him because you'd have to give him a big contract extension to satisfy him. But at some point, they gotta say, hey, Terry, we've taken this as far as we can. This is where we are right now. This is as far as we can go. The season is about to start. We'd like to have you with some reps with Jaden before the season. We're not going to sign you to a contract on Saturday, September 6th, and open the season on the 7th. That's not going to happen. I guess it could, but we don't want to do it that way. So it seems like the Commanders are in command here, and it also has changed in a large way from 6 weeks ago when McLaurin held that news conference at Eastern Motors. And I think the feel around town was, if you're looking at sentiment, it was tilted more towards McLaurin, maybe like 80%, because I don't think anybody really had a concept of what seems to be unrealistic numbers that he's asking for. I mean, if you look at all the reporting that's been done, all the general managers and front office people who have been canvassed on this, they all agree that he's not a guy who you're going to pay $32, $33 million for. It's just not going to happen. And the sooner he realizes that, the more set he's going to be and not cost himself a lot of money, which is what could conceivably happen here. If they play hardball and they say, okay, play out your contract and we'll decide at the end of the year whether we franchise you or not, then he may leave $50, $60 million on the table. We're talking about, when you talk about these contract extensions, they're big numbers, but the real number is the guaranteed money. And, some of these deals like TJ Watt, he got over $100 million in guaranteed money. That's what you're looking for. And if he plays out this season, he's got no guaranteed money except the $22.5 million. And if he plays really well, then he's only got one more year of cost certainty, and that puts him in the top 5. But again, injury or fall off in play, and then he's 32 and he's shopping around for a team, and he's looking back and saying, yeah, I could have had a lot of guaranteed money if I'd have played my cards differently. So love him. Hope he's on the team. Hope it works out. But this has gone way too far. We're a month into when he was due to report to camp, and he has yet to appear in a practice with this team. And if you were looking for, and I don't know how this will go once he signs. I mean, you wonder, could there be possibly some bad blood here, or is there an understanding between two guys? But Jaden Daniels, man, he's been smart about this. He has said nothing so far that would indicate that he's really angry at the team for not giving Terry an extension. Now, maybe it gets to the point where the season begins with 2 tough games. Giants expect to be better this year, and the Packers on the road. It's not going to be easy on Thursday night, and it could be they're 0-2. I can't imagine Terry's still a holdout by then, but let's say he is. Then you get to what happened with the Emmitt Smith holdout generations ago when the Cowboys opened the season 0-2, and Charles Haley was so mad about it, he threw his helmet into the wall at the RFK Stadium locker room, and it stuck. And he was really angry, and the team was angry. And the star players went to Jerry Jones and said, get this guy signed, and they did. They got Emmitt signed, and the Cowboys won another Super Bowl. So, tough situation. Tough. Albert Breer's got a couple of other interesting notes around the league, including what Eric Dickerson said regarding Shedeur Sanders. We'll get his response to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
In less than an hour, we're going to talk to Jane Levy. She used to be a sports writer with the Washington Post, loves baseball, has written a number of books about baseball, a couple of which I've read, about Sandy Koufax and Mickey Mantle. She wrote another one about Babe Ruth. She's got a book out now called Make Me Commissioner. Bob Costas has been asked many times, would you like to become commissioner? He says, hell no, I would not. But she wants to be, and lays out why she thinks she would make a good commissioner and her ideas on saving the game of baseball, which she believes has been choked to a large degree by analytics. And we will get to a conversation with her Coming up at 10:20, Albert Breer, guest yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show. He's one of those, insiders around the NFL, so they kind of cover a variety of stories. This one you may be aware of, and these kind of stories always surface, and I certainly wouldn't call Eric Dickerson an insider. He was a great running back. He's a Hall of Famer. He had a brief broadcast career doing sidelines for Monday Night Football, in which he was terrible. But he's still around. He works for the Rams, and he's a hail fellow, well met, somebody you would want to talk to, one of the great running backs of all time. And when he was on a talk show in Los Angeles, he unleashed this one, which you will hear, with reaction to it from SI's Albert Breer, who was on Dan Patrick's show.
And I'll tell you this much here, what I heard from someone that's in the NFL, that the NFL told other, don't draft him. Do not draft him. We're gonna make an example out of him. And this came from a very good source. And he said that, I won't say who, somebody called the Cleveland Browns and said, don't do that. Draft
really?
him. Yep, draft him. Don't do that. Because they weren't gonna draft him either. They weren't gonna draft him.
Your thoughts, Albert?
Yeah, I always think these sorts of conspiracies are a little overdone. I don't think there was any conspiracy here. I think it's relatively simple what happened. I think the great majority of NFL teams did not view him as a first-round prospect, contrary to what had been out there for the year previous. And then I think what happens is once you get past the first round, you look at the history over the years, not a lot of quarterbacks go in the second or third rounds. It's just the reality of it, like that. Most teams look at it like if there's a guy who's going to be our long-term answer at the position, we just take him in the first round. And if a guy's not going to be your long-term answer at the position, then you probably aren't going to take him in the second or third round because you're going to be looking for a long-term answer at another position with those picks. So the fate of Shedeur Sanders, I think he fell out of the first round for football reasons. I think he kept falling for everything else, right? Like for the fact that most coaches look at their backup quarterbacks and say, I want you to blend in with the furniture. I don't want to notice that you're even here. That's the way, for better or worse, most teams approach the quarterback position, which I think to some degree short-circuited the careers of guys like Tim Tebow and Colin Kaepernick. So Shedeur's case was complicated going into the draft, but I don't think it was that complicated where there was some sort of weird conspiracy to keep him out of the league.
Yeah, from what I was told by a source, he didn't interview well. He kind of came in and he was interviewing teams instead of the other way around.
Right.
And you're right, he didn't have first-round talent. There was nothing exceptional about him except for maybe his toughness and his pedigree. But I can't imagine all of these owners getting together and somebody saying, hey, everybody, listen, don't draft Shedeur Sanders. I think the Browns –
especially when there's somebody with the bullhorn that Dion has on the other side of it. You know what I mean? That seems like ridiculous. That seems like the wrong tree to bark up, doesn't it, Dan?
Yeah, it does.
Well, I don't know if Dion would do that. Dion is shrewd. He's smart, and he understands the media. So if he heard that there was this conspiracy not to draft his son, I'm not so sure he would have, as Breer suggests, a bullhorn in this. But let me say this from my perspective on this. I don't know Eric Dickerson. I covered him when he was with the Pony Express at SMU. That's over 40 years ago. But I do know Mel Kiper. And Mel Kiper talks to everybody before the draft. He is as well connected as anyone has ever been. That's been his lifeblood for over 40 years. And if there were something like this out there, he would have known about it. Believe me. So, yeah, Mel got a lot of attention for, I think, to be fair, going overboard in how shocked he was that Shedeur was falling down the board. But if there were a conspiracy to say, well, we're not taking this guy, we as a group of owners are not taking him, that's ridiculous. And if there was an owner who was involved in this conspiracy and thought that Shedeur Sanders could be really good, he would break ranks. You'd be stupid not to. If you got a player who can ultimately help you win and maybe win a Super Bowl down the road, you're not going to get involved in some nonsense like this. So, no, I would have a hard time buying that. And Dickerson, he's not an insider. He's a guy who talks to a lot of football people because they know him. They know who he is. And he lives in Los Angeles. And, there's a lot of media in Los Angeles, and there's a lot of people whispering things and all. But no, I just don't buy that in any way. The last thing from Albert Breer, and boy, you gotta just shake your head when you hear the source on this. But there is that Michigan-Ohio State rivalry. So Urban Meyer, who, as far as I'm concerned, is a disgrace. What happened in Jacksonville was atrocious. What he had in Florida with many of his players going to jail and ultimately Aaron Hernandez going to jail for murder and dying in prison in a suicide, and others who had all kinds of arrest records. He's no patron saint of college football in any way. He wins, and his name always comes up when big jobs are open. But he's now with Fox, and he also does a podcast. So he threw this out the other day, and he's looking at the Michigan situation with Jim Harbaugh, where he's now got a 10-year show cause. He's never going to coach college again anyway. But they found improprieties in the program and the spying and all that, and basically the slap on the hand was about $30 million, which is a lot of money. But in the grand scheme of things, not really that big a deal. Winning a national championship was worth a hell of a lot more than that for the school. And unlike punishments of the past, they're not vacating the national championship. They're not keeping them off television. They're not keeping them out of postseason play. It's just basically a money thing, which I don't think is that big of a deal. But clearly, Jim Harbaugh was found guilty of cheating. And he did sort of pay a penalty for that during the championship season when he was suspended for the first 3 games of the season and the last 3 games of the season, but was eligible when they got to the playoff and the national championship game. So we're looking at Jim Tressel. You remember Jim Tressel, who was the coach at Ohio State, and he was not only fired at Ohio State because player Terrell Pryor, who later played for the Redskins, Terrell Pryor and his teammates were trading jerseys, other memorabilia for tattoos, which nowadays looks like, yeah, that's really ridiculous. But in those days, they weren't getting paid, at least not over the table. So they suspended Tressel and they suspended Terrell Pryor because they didn't want them to just run away to the NFL. So what is being suggested by Urban Meyer is that now that Jim Harbaugh is in the NFL and now that Michigan has been found guilty of cheating under his leadership, that Harbaugh should be suspended by the NFL. This is the Albert Breer reaction to that.
I thought it was dumb at the time to suspend Tressel, so I don't know that I would support suspension of Harbaugh either. At the same time, I can remember why they did it. And if you remember, it was because they suspended Terrell Pryor. And what they were trying to do, what the NFL was trying to do, was they didn't want the pros to be a safe haven for guys to escape punishment from the NCAA. So Terrell Pryor was going to be suspended by the NCAA. So the league said, no, this can't be, an escape for you. So we're going to levy a suspension on you the way the NCAA would have coming into the league because he was going into the supplemental draft. And then when Tressel took the job with the Colts, people were like, well, wait a minute, like you forced the player to serve the suspension, so now why aren't you doing it to the coach? So I think it became one of those finger in the wind type things for the league where they heard the criticism and said, okay, like, well, we'll give the coach a suspension too, maybe not thinking about the precedent they were setting. The interesting thing is, though, I think we have had coaches in the past that have run away from the college game to the pros as a method of trying to escape punishment, right? Like we've seen that in the past. I think you could argue like that was Pete Carroll. Now, I think Pete would probably argue that, but a lot of people felt that way when he did it. Dennis Erickson, I think leaving Miami was sort of that way, right? Neither of these guys, I think in neither case that's what this was. Like Jim Tressel, I think would have been happy dying on the job at Ohio State. Like I think he would have done that as long as he could. He wasn't escaping to the NFL. And I don't think Harbaugh was escaping Michigan to go to the NFL either. I think he was going to the NFL regardless. In fact, I think if he had gone to the if the Vikings had offered him the job 2 years earlier when Kevin O'Connell took it, I think he would have left Michigan 2 years earlier than he did. So I don't think in either the Tressel case or the Harbaugh case, it was a guy trying to escape penalty and finding safe harbor in the NFL. There were different motivations for it.
100%. The NFL's not touching this. They're not going to suspend Harbaugh. Albert's probably too young for this, but maybe the first guy that did this was Ron Meyer, who was cheating his butt off at SMU. I mean, they later found that they were paying the players and they put the program on the death penalty. He got out the door before they caught up with him, and he went to the New England Patriots in 1982 when they were one of the worst teams in the league. This wasn't exactly going to the Chargers like Harbaugh with a franchise quarterback in Herbert. They sucked when he went there, and he was definitely escaping there because he was the one that set up the cheating. He's the one that set up the payroll. He was definitely going to get nabbed in that, and he escaped to the New England Patriots. Coming up, Jane Levy will join us in the 10 o'clock hour. She's got a new book out about baseball. It's called Make Me Commissioner.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Jane Levy is a former sports writer with the Washington Post. She has written multiple books about baseball, including biographies of Sandy Koufax and Mickey Mantle, both of which I have read. And she's got a new book out called Make Me Commissioner. Bob Costas has said many times, Jane, that he does not want to become commissioner of baseball. I know it's somewhat tongue-in-cheek with you, but why would you want to become commissioner of baseball?
Well, I figure I'm old enough that, people would have to be polite to me, and not take shots at me the way they do at poor Rob Manfred. I want to be commissioner because I love baseball, and I think I can fix it.
Yeah, well, that's the gist of the book, and while I haven't read the whole thing, I have flipped through it, and by the way, I didn't need a translation for Pippic, and I do actually.
You mean Puppic?
Puppic. See, my grandparents said Pippic, but you say Puppic. Okay, either way.
Pippic. Let's call the whole thing off, right?
Right. And I also have a Baltimore Orioles hat with Hebrew lettering, which I bought at the Hall of Fame a number of years ago. So I have that as well.
I wonder if Cal still has the one I gave him at some she dinner right after the streak ended. It was a lot of fun. Neither of us could read it, but we could guess what it said.
Exactly. So you can't sum up a book in one quote, but this is gold. When you talk to Annette Pico-Hosi, I think I have that correct, she's with the MIT Sports Analytics Lab, and I'm going to read this in the way that the FCC allows me to do so. You write that analytics have effed up baseball, and you ask her, don't you think it's your responsibility to un-F baseball? Does that kind of summarize your stance on wanting to become commissioner?
Yeah. I mean, analytics are not going away. Let's be real. And that's something I say very clearly there, and there's so much logic and so much history attached to them now that forget trying to get rid of it. We're not going back to station baseball or the way it was played in Mickey Mantle's era. But the excesses, and that's her main point, is that people who create these algorithms and metrics don't possess what is known in the analytics world as domain knowledge. That just means knowing what is going on. It means in baseball that they don't know baseball. Mm-hmm. How many times did I hear guys say, oh, somebody, some kid with an iPad shows up at batting practice and, some coach will say, did you ever put on a catcher's glove? And he looks at him like he's crazy. There's the gulf between these two factions is gigantic and needs to close. And there are ways to make use of them that are completely sensible, but they have been used to the exclusion of what players have started to call the human element. And the lack of recognition of what makes baseball most human and why you can't definitely predict what's going to happen in a given moment has gone way too far. Mm-hmm. So, for example, yes, numbers can tell you that 9 times out of 10, Rajai Davis is not going to hit a home run in the 2016 World Series. He hit all of 12 that year for the then Cleveland Indians. But it can't tell you what's going to happen in then one occasion when the human element, because he's coming up in a critical situation in a critical game that's never happened before, you can't tell how that person is going to respond. You can't tell what luck may do. You can't say what the pitcher may throw or may throw errantly. You can't predict that he's going to hit a home run off Aroldis Chapman in that moment, the young, very, very fast Aroldis Chapman.
Right.
So the presumption that you can, therefore, operate on exclusively on those percentages is nuts. It's plainly nuts. And what Pecco says is the problem is the people who are creating a lot of the metrics and formulas don't possess the main knowledge, and more seriously, don't think it's necessary. And that's the real crisis.
Yeah.
They don't understand that there's something worth knowing other than what they know.
Yeah, I think the beginning of this, and we're talking to Jane Levy, her book is Make Me Commissioner, is Moneyball, which even, people who are not necessarily interested in baseball watched, and the gist of it was, we didn't need to see the players. We're just looking at the numbers here. And once the numbers
Correct.
started to take over the game, that begat people like, Theo Epstein, who was Harvard, and more, those type of scholarly people taking over the game. And the human element, which you talk about, the tobacco-spitting scouts who, would travel the back dusty roads to find prospects, that's kind of been taken out of the game. And as you point out, I guess a lot of the fun has been taken out as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things about baseball, and I tried to get as much of this in there as I could. Baseball has, because it's such a long season and it is such a grind, and because baseball makes you a fatalist, whether you're a player or a fan, you're going to fail, two-thirds of the time. Humor is a big part of the game. You have to be able to laugh at it. But it isn't just the scouts, because, of course, that's changed. There are scouts still. I was astonished how many I met along the way. But look at somebody like Dusty Baker, who fought all through the last years of his tenure with the Astros, being told that what he had seen over more than 4 decades in the game didn't matter. And that's the nub of the issue. He said, they don't think there's anything that I can see with my 2 human eyes that have seen pretty much more than anybody else, that is informative enough to inform a decision.
So that brings us to the question. We know what the problem is. Do we get the toothpaste back in the tube? I mean, do we have now Kyle Schwarber, who hits 197 as a leadoff hitter and is in discussion for MVP of the league? I mean, what do we do now to get it back to what we grew up with, the station-to-station baseball that you talk about, the hit and run, the bunt, all that? I mean, is that going to come back to the game, or are we kind of stuck with this?
I think you're already seeing a bit of a reversal in course, and that's really welcome. I think the main issue to me is the pitching, because they've got a real crisis on their hands in terms of the number of stars, not just regular guys who show up once and then disappear into what used to be called the baseball encyclopedia.
Right.
Major League Baseball isn't making stars. And they're not making stars because, one, they don't seem to know how to, but also because so many of them are getting injured. The numbers of dollars they're spending to have people sit on the bench on the IL is astonishing. So far this year, I think the Dodgers have paid $63 million to 22 pitchers not to pitch. Well, if you begin to encourage changes that change the way guys throw, that don't destroy their elbows, and maybe enforce a way to not throw so hard, and realize that texture and changing speeds and subtlety is not entirely a bad way to go. If you massage the strike zone to change it so they can't just throw 100 miles an hour up in the corner under your hands where you can't touch it, people are going to have to make more contact. And if making more contact means changing the texture of the game. I would say probably my most radical suggestion, and it comes hand in hand with Dan Okrent, the man who, other than Pecco, did most to destroy the game because he created
rotisserie baseball.
He created rotisserie baseball.
Yeah.
We're in agreement that if you put an 18-foot plexiglass wall all around every outfield, and even the catches, I know people say, oh, everybody likes to see these guys go over the wall to make the catch. Well, that's becoming ubiquitous. Bringing back the home run is becoming as ubiquitous as the home runs and the strikeouts have become. So if you put a wall out there that balls carom off of, it will place more of an importance on having somebody who can actually throw from right field to third base, like Dave Parker, recent Hall of Famer, and who unfortunately didn't live to get to Cooperstown himself. So if you have a game that encourages doubles and triples, which is what Major League Baseball says fans tell them they want to see, then you start to value other skills, and teams will have to start to acquire and develop other kinds of players who aren't so one-dimensional. And if you bring doubles and triples back, then maybe there's a role for some of the other subtleties that have gone the way of the dodo bird.
Talking to Jane Levy, book is Make Me Commissioner. I believe, if I read correctly, the genesis of the idea from the book was a conversation that you had with Joe Torre and Sandy Koufax at Cooperstown, where Sandy went as far as to say about baseball, I don't watch it anymore, which was as much of a gut punch for me as if he had said, gee, I really wish I would have pitched on Yom Kippur. What I mean, are these old school voices heard anymore? People who
no, they feel completely ignored.
Right.
And Jim Cott told Jim Palmer, and I trust both these guys completely, so I believe this to be true, that when he and when Cott and Carew and Molitor went to spring training with the Twins, they were basically kept in quarantine and not allowed to talk to the players. And Cott heard Carlos Correa, then still a Twin, walk by and say, what do those guys know? What do those guys have to tell us? And he told Palmer, I wanted to clobber him. And so again, there is, for a game that is built and whose analytics are built on numbers that were created by Harry Chadwick in the 1800s, to completely refute the importance of experience, wisdom, knowledge, is not only horrifying, but it's terrifying because of what it says about the rest of American culture, where that too seems to be the case. And Pecco issues a warning about the coming of AI and not understanding how decisions that run our lives are made and who they're made by. People who don't know the domain knowledge, don't know what matters in a given sport or industry or hobby or pursuit. I mean, do you know how your taxes get paid? I certainly don't know. I know I press a button, but I don't know what happens after that. I just know it's not people anymore.
Yeah, I have an accountant, but yeah, I understand that. The other thing is that you look at the game today, and I think they did save it with the pitch clock, but the game today is pretty financially healthy. Maybe that's a lot to do with television and streaming. But, I remember when the Nationals, came here in 2005 and they were the Expos and baseball maybe wasn't a real threat, but they were talking about folding up franchises. And I think the owner of the Twins said, oh, fold mine, fold mine. You're not getting that now. The game is healthy, right? Is it not, Jane?
Well, I would say it's wealthy, but not healthy.
Okay.
Rob Manfred went before cameras and told people or reporters in February that we should all expect a lockout at the end of the current collective bargaining agreement, which is December 2nd, 2026. Now, what in God's name is a commissioner doing telling fans at the opening of a season where you want them to come to the ballpark that you should expect that the game we want you to love is going to be messed up in 15 months. And the issue is over a salary cap.
Yeah.
Because even though it is a $12 billion industry, they're still like kids in a sandbox who can't figure out how to share it. And it's not equitable. And so you have franchises who can't compete. I think you knew Roy Eisenhart, who ran the A's for his father-in-law, Wally Haas, back in the 80s. He was
I know the
the
name.
guy who brought Billy Beane in.
Right.
And, he said, wind here, just slammed the door. You have franchises that from the end of, April are not competitive. So why should you go out and see the Pittsburgh Pirates with its beautiful stadium, the most beautiful probably in all of baseball? Why go there? And Palmer said to me, why shouldn't fans in Pittsburgh have as much to root for and as much reason to go to PNC Park as this is actually stretching the truth, but right now with the Mets, but as people do to go to Citi Field,
right,
or Yankee Stadium or Fenway. And that there's going to be X number of franchises from the beginning of the season that cannot and will not compete. Some, it's a choice because they do get money from, collective bargaining solutions that, the collective bargaining taxes that are placed, luxury taxes that are divvied up. But you have franchises where the owners don't spend the money that they are required to spend on rosters. So it's not like there's one bad guy in this solution that has to change. And so I would argue that, there's plenty of money to go around. They just can't figure out how to share it.
Yeah. Well, I know that Rob Manfred has a contract through 2029, so he's got job security. Have you approached him with any of these ideas? Has you had any conversation with him about that?
At the very beginning of this, you do, as a reporter, you do the due diligence, and I called and asked for an interview, and I never heard back.
Yeah.
And he's done some things right, and it's not all his fault. A lot of what happened to baseball was institutionally baked in and required lots of decades of laissez-faire management in the higher-ups of MLB to get to the point where they found themselves in the situation you described with the Nats and the Twins,
right,
and franchises that just said, "Oh, please take me." So I got to credit them for the pitch clock. It's worked like a charm.
Yep.
It was absolutely necessary. Baseball didn't collapse when timelessness, took a back seat to poetry. And I don't particularly like, in fact, I hate the Ghost Runner because the changes that should and need to be made are the ones that preserve the essence of what baseball is. The Ghost Runner subverts that, in my opinion, because it used to be that you had to earn your way around the bases. You didn't get a head start at second base.
Yeah.
And so, and it also precludes some of the great moments that took place in baseball history, like the Marichal Warren Spahn 16-inning game at the Stick, where Willie Mays ended it with a home run in the bottom of the 16th. I know this will sound very old to a lot of people, but I don't think it's fair to end games precipitously and preemptively when, in fact, 75% of extra inning games now end after the 10th inning.
Yeah.
So why can't baseball games end like baseball games are supposed to end, at least to the 13th inning? Let them go through the batting order one more time. That's what I would do there.
Yeah, kind of like.
And I'd also put the Ghost Runner at first base, not second.
Yeah, kind of like hockey. Before they get to the shootout, they play some extra time. I'll leave you with this. This is one of my favorite baseball photographs. It's at the end of the Game 7 of the 1960 World Series with the Bill Mazeroski home run. It was a 10-9 game, bottom of the ninth inning, multiple pitching changes. The clock says 3:35. The game started at 1 o'clock. A 2-hour and 35-minute game with no pitch clock and none of the stuff that they have now. So it is what it is, but,
Well, I mean, Sandy Koufax threw an 87-pitch gem in under 2 hours.
Yeah.
It's not like it can't be done. It's all a question of where you place the value and what you say is important to the game. And do I think they were likely to go back to that on their own? No. You had to have good government impose the pitch clock, and hallelujah for that. But you can take your, Ron Washington, who I adore and who is manager of the Angels, and as we all know, he's been ill and had to leave the team midway through the season. But he was showing me the details, the craft of using a bag at first base, or what he called cutting the bag, in order to give yourself a 2-inch head start, a 2-inch advantage to stealing a base. Those kind of crafts are not taught anymore. That's why you see the Yankees making 4 errors and walking 8 guys last night. I mean, I'm a Yankee fan, and I'm disgusted.
Yeah,
that was...
They hit 9 home runs this week, so that makes up for it. The book is Make Me Commissioner. Is written by Jane Levy, who's written multiple books about baseball. Good luck with it. It's out, in about a week or so?
September 9th.
Very good. Thank you very much. Best of luck with it.
Thank you. It's so nice to talk to you again.
Good to talk to you. That's Jane Levy. And again, the book is Make Me Commissioner, How Baseball Can Be Improved. And I don't know if they get the analytics back in the tube, but maybe. They gave us a pitch clock, which a lot of people thought wouldn't happen, so you never know. And that will do it for me for this week. Ram is coming up next. He will do tomorrow's final exhibition game, and then we're off and rolling for the football season. I want to thank Isaac Kuhn-Harris for running the show today, and Jane Levy for joining us. Her new book is Make Me Commissioner. Bram is up next. I'll see you Monday morning at 9 a.m.